In the 1990s, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air became one of the most beloved shows on television. It made Will Smith a star and gave audiences a constant dose of laughs, fashion, and family moments. But under the jokes and bright fashion, it was also telling a deeper story, one about the challenges and realities of growing up black in America. Every joke about Will's life in West Philly and every awkward moment at Bel-Air Academy carried the same message. Moving into white, wealthy spaces didn't erase the racism you faced, and having money didn't remove the pressures, stereotypes, and expectations placed on black youth. In this video, we're breaking down how the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air slipped hard truths about race and survival into the lives of black youth, wrapped in humor that millions never realized was a warning. Before we get into it, hit subscribe for more breakdowns on black representation and culture in media that many people might have missed. Now, let's begin. From the opening theme song, audiences knew The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was a story about change. We all rapped along as Will Smith told us how he left West Philadelphia after a couple of guys started making trouble, landing in his wealthy relative's Bel-Air mansion. The rhyme was light, the visuals were playful, but the premise actually came from something real. For many black families, sending a child to live with relatives in a safer, more resourced neighborhood is not a quirky plot device, but a strategy for survival. The 1980s and early 90s were marked by spikes in urban violence, the fallout from crack-era policing, and economic disinvestment in black neighborhoods. For parents, especially single mothers, the choice was often stark. Keep your child close and risk them being pulled into dangerous situations, or send them somewhere with more opportunity, even if it meant distance and cultural disconnection. Will's move to Bel-Air reflected this reality in a way that sitcom audiences weren't used to seeing, even if it was wrapped in humor. From the very first episode, the show established that environment matters. It didn't matter how smart, resourceful, or charismatic you were. If the place you grew up in was riddled with systemic neglect, your chances of getting caught in its traps were high. For Will, starting fresh meant leaving behind his friends, his community, and the familiarity of West Philly's rhythms. That's not sitcom fluff. That's the lived experience of thousands of black youth in that era, and the emotional cost of that choice was rarely addressed in television at the time. The pilot didn't just set up a fish-out-of-water comedy. It was a warning about how cycles of poverty and violence operate and what it takes to break free from them. Will's journey was not just about adapting to Bel-Air's wealth and privilege, but about carrying the weight of where he came from into a space that didn't understand it. That's the quiet truth, Fresh Prince, embedded in its very foundation. Leaving home may save your life, but it doesn't erase the reality that shaped you. For Will, arriving in Bel-Air wasn't the end of his struggles. It was the start of a new kind of pressure. The mansion, the designer clothes, and the elite private school looked like a dream compared to West Philly. But the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air made it clear that wealth didn't erase the complexities of being young, black, and visible in America. If anything, the contrast between Will's world and the one he entered exposed a different set of obstacles. Bel-Air Academy, with its manicured lawns and polished halls, represented opportunity. But it also represented a space where Will was an outsider from day one. His way of speaking, his style, his humor, all the things that made him confident back home, were now under constant scrutiny. The show used comedy to highlight these moments, but the reality behind them was serious. Adapting to a new environment often meant code switching, managing how you present yourself, so you're accepted without losing your identity. For black youth, that balancing act is exhausting and risky. Carlton's presence deepened this lesson. Unlike Will, Carlton had grown up in Bel-Air's wealth, spoke the language of privilege, and believed in the promise of meritocracy. The idea that if you worked hard, played by the rules, and kept your record clean, success and respect would follow. But the show dismantled that belief in episodes like Mistaken Identity, where Will and Carlton are pulled over and arrested simply for driving a nice car in a white neighborhood. Carlton initially defends the police, believing they're just doing their job, until reality hits him. His clean-cut image couldn't save him. The lesson was unavoidable. In a country where racial bias is built into the system, assimilation is not protection. This was a warning for every young Black viewer who thought that playing by the rules would guarantee safety. The episode aired in 1990, just months before the Rodney King beating brought police brutality into national headlines. For many Black households, it wasn't news. It was confirmation of what they already knew. Bel-Air, for all its luxury, was not a sanctuary. It was a testing ground where Will had to learn how to navigate white spaces without being swallowed by them. And Carlton had to confront the fact that his upbringing didn't make him immune to discrimination. The show was telling Black youth something vital. Even when you move into rooms of power and privilege, the rules of racism still apply. The Banks family lived in a sprawling mansion, drove expensive cars, and moved in circles of influence. Uncle Phil was a respected judge. Aunt Vivian was a highly educated professional, and their children had access to every advantage money could buy. Yet time and again, the show revealed that wealth didn't shield them from prejudice. It simply changed the way that prejudice showed up. Sometimes that prejudice came from outside the Black community, in the form of racial profiling, condescension, or tokenism. Other times, it came from within. Episodes like Blood is Thicker Than Mud tackled the painful reality of gatekeeping inside the Black community itself. When Will and Carlton try to join a Black fraternity, Will is welcomed, but Carlton is rejected for not being Black enough because of his privileged upbringing. This wasn't just a jab at Carlton's personality. It was an exploration of the tension between class and cultural identity, and the way those divisions can fracture unity. For young Black viewers, the message was layered. You could achieve financial success, gain social status, and still be subject to the same systems of judgment and exclusion as someone with none of those resources. The show warned against assuming that economic mobility would lead to full acceptance. If anything, moving up often put you in positions where you were constantly evaluated, sometimes by people who looked like you, sometimes by people who didn't. And in both cases, the standards were often impossible to meet. By showing that the Banks family faced these challenges, even at the highest rungs of society, Fresh Prince was speaking to Black youth directly. Financial stability is worth striving for, but it is not a shield. It can give you tools, options, and access, but it won't dismantle the biases that shape how the world sees you. At first glance, the Banks family worked like any classic sitcom family. A stern but loving father, a strong and intelligent mother, and a mix of personalities among the children. The humor often came from the clash between Will's free-spirited personality and Uncle Phil's strict expectations. But underneath the jokes, the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air was showing something deeper: how strong family structures could provide guidance and stability for Black youth navigating a world stacked against them. Uncle Phil wasn't just a comedic foil for Will. He was a model of authority, discipline, and responsibility. The show gave him moments of warmth and moments of firmness, showing that protecting a young Black man meant setting high standards and demanding accountability. But it also made clear that even a figure like Uncle Phil couldn't shield Will and Carlton from the realities outside their home. He could teach them how to carry themselves, but he couldn't change how others saw them. One of the most powerful examples of this came in Papa's Got a Brand New Excuse. Will's father reappears after 14 years, promising to reconnect. Will is hopeful, ready to believe in him, but at the last minute, his father leaves again. The episode ends without a joke. Will breaks down, questioning why his father doesn't want him, before collapsing into Uncle Phil's arms. For many Black viewers, this moment hit painfully close to home. It acknowledged the emotional toll of absentee fathers, but also showed the importance of stepping in to fill that gap. The dynamic between Will, Uncle Phil, and the rest of the family sent a quiet but clear message. In a society that will test you at every turn, having people who demand your best and stand by you matters. But the show never pretended that family alone could erase the pressures of being young, black, and visible in America. The Banks household was a place of strength, not a bubble of protection. For Will, life in Bel-Air wasn't just about adjusting to wealth. It was about learning how to operate in spaces where his identity was always under quiet examination. The show often used humor to frame this, but beneath the jokes was a truth many black youth know well. The unspoken rules of white, affluent environments require constant self-awareness. Will's style, speech, and worldview stood out at Bel-Air Academy, and while these traits made him magnetic, they also made him a target for judgment. Some saw him as too brash or too casual, while others treated him as a novelty. The expectation was clear: conform enough to fit in, but not so much that you erase yourself entirely. That's a balance no one hands you a rule book for, and Fresh Prince showed the trial and error of figuring it out. Carlton's experience mirrored this from the opposite angle. He fit seamlessly into white spaces, but struggled with being accepted as authentically black by peers from different backgrounds. The tension between him and Will on this point wasn't just for laughs. It was a commentary on the pressure black youth face to prove themselves in multiple directions. Too much assimilation and you risk being called out by your own community. Too little, and you risk losing opportunities in spaces dominated by white expectations. The show never presented a simple solution. Instead, it treated this navigation as a lifelong skill. You adapt enough to move forward, but you guard the parts of yourself that define you. For black youth watching, this was an essential takeaway. The world will try to mold you into something more palatable, but survival isn't about becoming someone else. It's about learning when to blend in and when to stand firm. One of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air's most effective tools was its ability to mask serious commentary and humor. The jokes, the physical comedy, the exaggerated facial expressions, all of it created a layer of comfort for the audience. But that comfort made it easier for the show to land harder truths without losing viewers. Many of the issues it addressed, racial profiling, class divides, absentee parents, code switching, could have felt heavy-handed in a drama. But in Fresh Prince, the punchlines kept people engaged long enough to hear the message. A scene that started with Will cracking a joke about Bel-Air culture could end with him calling out double standards in the classroom. An argument with Uncle Phil might end in a laugh, but not before the audience heard a pointed lesson about responsibility or systemic inequality. This approach worked on multiple levels. For black youth, the comedy made the lessons feel relatable, like conversations they'd have at home or with friends. For white audiences, the humor softened what might otherwise have been confrontational truths, giving them space to process ideas they might have rejected if presented directly. And for the culture at large, it proved that a mainstream sitcom could carry real political and social weight without sacrificing entertainment. It was a subtle but deliberate choice, using laughter to open the door and truth to keep people inside. By the time the audience realized they were watching a commentary on race, class, and survival, the message had already landed. And that's what made the show timeless. The jokes aged, but the lessons stayed relevant. Decades after its debut, The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air remains more than nostalgic television. The cultural shifts since the 1990s haven't erased the conditions the show warned about. In many ways, they've made them sharper. Black youth still face the reality that entering elite spaces doesn't mean leaving racism behind. Code switching is still a necessary survival skill in schools, workplaces, and public life. And the belief that wealth or status can insulate you from discrimination continues to be tested and disproven. The same pressures we'll face at Bel-Air Academy exist in classrooms today. The same disbelief Carlton had in mistaken identity still echoes among those who want to trust institutions that repeatedly fail them. And the tensions between different black experiences, whether shaped by class, geography, or upbringing, still spark conversations about what it means to be authentically black. What Fresh Prince offered was not a cure, but preparation. It gave viewers a blueprint for recognizing injustice when it's dressed in politeness, for seeing through the illusion that access equals acceptance, and for holding on to cultural identity while navigating spaces that were not built for you. It also showed that strength comes from connection to family, to community, and to self, even when those connections are tested. The show may have faded, but the message hasn't. If anything, the messages hidden in The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air are even more urgent now. The world still demands that Black youth know how to move through it with both caution and confidence. And that's exactly what this sitcom was quietly teaching all along. From Carlton's naive belief in meritocracy to Will's constant need to prove himself, the show was more than entertainment. It was a cultural mirror and a guide, showing Black youth how to survive in a world that sees them before it hears them. It proved that representation isn't just about visibility, it's about telling the truth, even when it's hidden in a punchline. If you grew up watching Will, Carlton, and the Banks family, you were getting more than entertainment. You were getting lessons in resilience, identity, and awareness. Lessons that are still as necessary today as they were in the 90s. If you want more breakdowns on Black representation and culture in media, stories that shaped us, messages that prepared us, and the ones too many people missed, hit subscribe. Because the conversations we have here aren't just about the past. They're about understanding the present and taking control of your future. See you in the next one.